"His blood be on us and on our children." These were the words uttered by the Jews at Jesus' trial, even as Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, sought to dissuade them. The chief priests and scribes, the religious leaders, who were to guide the people in the ways and will of God, had convinced them to seek the crucifixion of Jesus, fulfilling the scriptures that, "He came unto his own, and his own received him not." Pilate took water and washed his hands, absolving himself of the death of an innocent man. He released Barabbas to them, and when he had had Jesus flogged, he delivered him to the Jews to be crucified. Some of Pilate's soldiers, in the bid to amuse themselves, took Jesus Christ into their headquarters and marched out their entire battalion to come watch. They stripped him of his garments and dressed him up in a scarlet robe. They made a crown of long, sharp thorns and put it on his head, and they placed a stick in his right hand as a scepter. Then they knelt before him in mockery, yelling, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and clubbed him on the head with the stick, and like a lamb dumb before his shearer, he opened not his mouth. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him again. Then they led him away to be crucified. Due to physical exhaustion from all the beatings he'd received, Christ was unable to carry his cross all the way by himself. As they were on the way, they came across a man named Simon, who was from Cyrene, and the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. Great crowds followed close by, including many grief-stricken women. But Christ turned and said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, don't weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are coming when people will beg the mountains to fall on them and the hills to bury them." This he said regarding the seasons of tribulations that would follow after his second coming. 2 other criminals were led out, alongside Christ, to be crucified. At Golgotha, the soldiers offered Christ a mild painkiller, a mixture of wine and myrrh. But when he tasted it, he wouldn't drink it. He was nailed to the cross at about 9 a.m., with the other 2 transgressors, one on his left and the other on his right. Even though the crucifixion was one of the most gruesome and shameful ways to die, Christ knew that if he was to draw all men to himself, he would have to be lifted up on the cross. He would be hung between heaven and earth, the perfect place for the intercessor of mankind. He was to be the midpoint, the bridge, between God and humanity. Pilate set up over his head his accusation, written in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." The chief priest protested, asking that it be adjusted to read, "He said he was the King of the Jews." But Pilate declined. What he had written, he had written. The soldiers shared his garments and vestures amongst themselves, and they sat and watched Christ and the criminals slowly fade away. The chief priests and scribes also stood by, mocking. They challenged Christ to save himself and come down from the cross as proof that he was indeed the Son of God. This was something the devil had suggested to Christ while he was being tempted in the wilderness. The devil had asked him to prove he was the Son of God by jumping down from a pinnacle, and like the last time, he declined. As the chief priests and several passers-by continued to mock Jesus, one of the criminals, who was hanging with him, railed at him, saying, "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and save us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Don't you fear God? We're justly punished for our crimes, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come in your kingdom." And Jesus said to him, "I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise." Then Jesus looked over and saw his mother and John, his beloved disciple, and he said to her, "Woman, "Look, here is your son." And to John he said, "Look, here is your mother." And from that moment, the disciple accepted her as his own mother. From noon to 3 p.m., the whole land was covered with darkness. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus shouted with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Then, seeing that everything had been completed, he said, "I thirst." A jug of sour wine was standing by. Someone put a sponge, soaked with the wine, on a javelin and lifted it to his mouth. And when he had received it, he said, "It is finished." He bowed his head and gave up the ghost. And behold, the veil at the temple, that separated the Holy of Holies from the outer court, was torn in two from the top to the bottom. And the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared unto many. All these happened on Friday, a day before the Sabbath. So in order not to leave their bodies on the cross till the first day of the following week, since the Jewish tradition forbade working on the Sabbath day. That evening, Joseph of Arimathea, an honorable counselor and a secret disciple of Jesus, requested for the body of his master from Pilate. He, alongside Nicodemus and several women, laid Jesus to rest in a new tomb, and rolled a stone over its entrance. After sundown, the high priests and Pharisees arranged a meeting with Pilate. They said, "Sir, we just remembered that liar announced while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will be raised.' We've got to get that tomb sealed until the third day. There's a good chance his disciples will come and steal the corpse and then go around saying, 'He's risen from the dead.' Then we'll be worse off than before, the final deceit surpassing the first." Pilate told them, "You will have a guard. Go ahead and secure it the best you can." So they went out and secured the tomb, sealing the stone and posting guards. After Jesus gave up the ghost, the veil in the temple was torn in two, signifying our access to the Holy of Holies by Jesus' sacrifice. And 2, the graves were opened, signifying that Jesus' sacrifice liberates us from the prison of the grave. Those that sleep in Christ will wake up with him.